One late night, a cleaning woman
Hello, is
picked
this
up a
the
phone she
police?
wasn't supposed to touch.
I
And
need
that
to
single
report something
decision
happening
saved a
right now.
billion-dollar deal. This is the story of how someone the world overlooked
Hello,
became
is
the
this the
person no one
police?
could ignore. Most
I
people
need
don't
to
notice
report
the
something
people who
happening
clean
right
their
now.
offices. Think about it. When you walk into work in the morning, the floors are polished, the trash cans are empty, the windows gleam as if the sun itself polished them overnight. But how often do you stop and ask yourself who did all of this? Usually we don't. We see a mop. We see a cart. We see a uniform. But we rarely see the person behind them. For years, Marjorie Ellis lived in that shadow. Marjorie was 59 years old, born and raised in Akron, Ohio. She was not the kind of woman who drew attention to herself. She didn't speak loudly, she didn't demand anything from the world. She carried herself with a quiet dignity, even when life gave her more burdens than blessings. She had raised 3 children almost entirely on her own. 3 kids, 3 different personalities, 3 endless appetites, and just one paycheck at a time. Her days had been a blur of double shifts in restaurants, folding laundry in overheated laundromats, and later, the exhausting grind of cleaning jobs. It wasn't glamorous. It wasn't what little girls dream about when they're young. But it was steady. And steady meant survival. By the time her children were grown, raising families of their own, Marjorie had been cleaning offices at Crawford Dynamics for nearly 7 years. Crawford Dynamics wasn't just any company. It was a towering multinational corporation, a name that carried weight across Cleveland and beyond. Their headquarters downtown was a palace of glass and marble, shining against the skyline. Executives in tailored suits filled the building by day, but by night it belonged to people like Marjorie. Every evening she followed the same rhythm. She rode the bus into the city lights flickering past her tired eyes. She clocked in, tied her apron, and pushed her squeaky cart through long, echoing hallways. She vacuumed the boardrooms where million-dollar decisions were made. She dusted the shelves lined with awards that weren't hers. She emptied bins stuffed with crumpled papers. Papers that might have shaped futures, papers she would never be asked to read. She moved like clockwork, step by step, room by room, always unseen. And yet, if you had asked her children about her, they would have told you the truth. They would have told you their mother was stronger than steel. That her hands might be rough from bleach and her knees might ache from scrubbing floors, but her love never faltered. Still, when you spend enough time being invisible to the world, part of you begins to believe that invisibility is who you are. That's where Marjorie was in her life, working hard, surviving, quietly fading into the background. But sometimes life has a way of surprising us. Sometimes, in the middle of the most ordinary night, something happens that forces you out of the shadows. Something happens that reminds the world you're not invisible at all. For Marjorie, that moment came on a quiet night near midnight, on the 22nd floor of Crawford Dynamics. The city lights glittered against the windows. The hum of the air conditioning filled the silence. Everything felt like it always did, predictable, unnoticed, routine. She thought it was just another night. But fate had a different plan. Because that was the night she heard the phone ring. And once she answered it, nothing in her life would ever be the same. The 22nd floor was always the quietest part of Marjorie's shift. It was the executive suite, the kingdom of polished desks, framed cityscapes, and leather chairs that cost more than her rent. At that hour, the place felt like a museum. Silent, spotless, almost sacred. Marjorie liked it that way. She could vacuum without interruption, dust the endless shelves of awards and books, and let her mind drift. Sometimes she thought about her grandchildren. Sometimes she thought about the bills waiting at home. And sometimes she didn't think at all. She just worked. But that night, something cut through the silence. At first, she thought it was in her head, a sound she imagined. But no, there it was again. A sharp, insistent ringing. She froze, mop in hand. It was coming from the desk. Not just any desk. Richard Crawford's desk. The CEO. The man whose name was on the building. The phone kept ringing louder with each pulse. It wasn't polite. It wasn't casual. It was urgent. Relentless. Almost angry. Marjorie's heart began to pound. She knew the rules. Cleaners didn't touch company property. They didn't open drawers. They didn't move papers. And they certainly didn't answer phones. Her supervisor had made that clear. We're here to clean, not to get involved. She told herself to ignore it. Just keep moving. Empty the bins, mop the floors, walk away. But the ringing wouldn't stop. It echoed through the suite like a dare. It felt almost personal, as if the sound was calling her. Her hand trembled as she set the mop against the wall. She glanced around, empty offices, dark hallways, no witnesses. Still, she hesitated. What if she lost her job? What if someone found out? What if this was the one mistake that cost her the only steady paycheck she had? But then another thought pushed forward, soft but undeniable. What if it's important? She took a step closer. Her palms felt clammy. The phone rang again. And before she could stop herself, she reached out and picked up the receiver. Hello? On the other end, a voice exhaled in relief. A man's voice, clipped, urgent, with a German accent. Finally, someone answers. This is Stefan Keller from Munich. Where is Crawford? This deal is collapsing. Marjorie blinked. For a moment, she couldn't find her voice. Sir, I'm not. But Keller didn't wait. His words came fast, sharp with anger. They changed the contract, added an exclusivity clause that was never agreed upon. If this is not corrected by morning, we walk away. Do you hear me? The entire partnership dies. Marjorie's knees felt weak. She wasn't supposed to be here. She wasn't supposed to be holding this phone. She opened her mouth to explain again that she was just the night staff, but the man kept going. His voice was heavy with betrayal, his patience shredded. Her eyes darted to the desk. Papers lay scattered across it, some with yellow highlights, others marked with notes. She remembered overhearing executives a week earlier, their voices sharp, talking about forcing through exclusivity. She hadn't understood all of it then. But now it made sense. Someone had slipped something in. Someone was trying to cheat. And this man, this powerful partner across the ocean, was ready to destroy the deal over it. Marjorie swallowed hard. Her voice shook, but she spoke. Sir, I'm no lawyer. I don't even work in these offices. But I think you're right. That clause, it wasn't supposed to be there. Please, just hold on until morning. Mr. Crawford will fix it. There was silence on the line. For a moment, she feared he'd hung up. Then Keller's voice returned, tight and suspicious. Who are you? Marjorie's throat tightened. She almost whispered it. The night cleaner. Another long pause. Then unexpectedly Keller laughed, but it wasn't cruel. More like disbelief. The night cleaner. Of course. And yet you make more sense than half the executives I speak with. His voice hardened again. Fine. I will wait. But only until sunrise. Tell Crawford the deal dies otherwise. And then the line went dead. Marjorie stood there, the receiver heavy in her hand, her heart thundering in her chest. What had just happened? She had never signed a contract. Never sat in a boardroom. Never even shaken Richard Crawford's hand. And yet, in that moment, she had been the only thing standing between his company and disaster. For years she had been invisible. Just the woman with the mop. The one nobody noticed. But tonight she mattered. She hung up the phone slowly, her hand trembling. The office was silent again, but the silence felt different now. Charged, heavy with the weight of what she had done. And just when she thought it was over, the phone began to ring again. The phone rang again. Loud, sharp, relentless. Marjorie flinched as if it had teeth. Her first instinct was to run, just walk out, finish her shift, pretend none of this had ever happened. But she knew better. Whoever was calling wasn't finished. And maybe, just maybe, she was the only one left to hear him. With trembling fingers, she lifted the receiver again. Hello. This time Keller's voice came harder, sharper. Tell me the truth, he demanded. Did your company try to cheat me? Was this exclusivity clause deliberate? Marjorie froze. Her mouth went dry. She wasn't supposed to know the answer. She wasn't supposed to be in this conversation at all. But she remembered the tone of those executives she'd overheard, boasting about slipping it in, as if the whole world were just a game. And something inside her broke. For years she had swallowed her voice. At restaurants where customers treated her like furniture. At laundromats where people barked orders without saying thank you. Even here in these endless offices where executives passed by without ever seeing her. But now, for the first time, someone was asking her to tell the truth. So she did. Mr. Keller, she said, her voice low but steady, I think someone inside this company did get greedy. I think they tried to take more than they were supposed to. But I also know this. Mr. Crawford himself is not like that. He built this place on his word. I've seen the way people speak of him. I don't believe he would cheat you. There was silence on the other end. A long, heavy silence. Marjorie clutched the phone tighter. Her knees wanted to buckle, but she stayed standing. Finally, Keller spoke. His voice was colder now, but thoughtful. You speak as though you know him. Marjorie swallowed. I don't. Not really. But I've worked here long enough to see what kind of man he is. And I know this, he won't let this stand. Please, just wait until morning. Another pause. Then, to her surprise, Keller sighed. You are a cleaner. Yet you defend him with more honesty than his lawyers. Do you know how rare that is? Marjorie blinked, stunned. I will wait, Keller continued. But only until sunrise. No later. This is not corrected, everything ends. Do you understand? Yes, sir, Marjorie whispered. Good, he said. Then we speak again at dawn. And then the line went dead. Marjorie slowly lowered the phone. Her body shook. Her chest ached from the pounding of her heart. She looked around the office, the wide glass walls reflecting the city's glow. The leather chairs, the polished tables, the contracts spread across the desk. This was a world she wasn't supposed to touch. A world that wasn't hers. And yet, tonight, she was standing in the middle of it, its only guardian, its only witness. She pulled out a chair and sank into it. For the first time in her life, she sat in the CEO's chair. It felt wrong. Too soft. Too powerful. Too much for someone like her. She placed her hands on the armrests, rough from years of bleach and scrubbing, and thought, these hands don't belong here. But then another thought followed. Tonight they do. The office was silent again. But it wasn't the silence of routine anymore. It was the silence that follows after a storm, when the air still crackles with thunder. Marjorie sat there in the dark, her heart slowing, her breathing calming. She stared out at the Cleveland skyline, the lake reflecting the city lights, and felt a strange mix of terror and pride. She had been invisible for so long. And yet, in the span of a few minutes, she had become the only person a powerful man across the ocean trusted. The weight of that thought pressed on her like a stone. Hours passed. She couldn't remember vacuuming the last hallway or dusting the final desk. Her body moved, but her mind stayed locked on that phone. Would Keller really wait? Would Crawford believe her? Would she lose her job for touching something that wasn't hers? Or would tomorrow morning prove that, for once, she had done the right thing? When the clock on the wall finally ticked past 6, the sky outside began to soften. The first hints of dawn brushed against the glass towers of Cleveland. Marjorie wiped her hands on her apron, though they weren't dirty. She stood near the CEO's office, unable to walk away. She should have been heading for the bus stop, but something told her to stay. Because when the sun rose, her part in this story would be revealed. And nothing would ever be the same again. Morning in downtown Cleveland came slowly. The first rays of sun turned the lake into silver glass, and the skyscrapers caught the light like towers of fire. The city was waking. Cars hummed on the streets below, horns blared, and coffee shops opened their doors. But high on the 22nd floor of Crawford Dynamics, Marjorie Ellis waited. Her shift should have been over an hour ago. Normally she would be on the bus by now, riding back toward Akron, watching the factories and bridges blur past the windows. But today her feet refused to move. She stayed. Because she knew something was about to happen. At 7 a.m., the elevator doors slid open. Richard Crawford, CEO of Crawford Dynamics, stepped out. Tall, brisk, sharp as a blade in his suit. His assistant hurried beside him, clutching a folder thick with papers. They were mid-conversation, voices clipped, purposeful. Then Crawford stopped. His eyes landed on his desk. The phone was off the hook. He frowned. And that was the moment Marjorie's voice burst out, before fear could stop her. Sir, please, I need to explain. The words tumbled from her like water breaking a dam. She told him about the phone call. About Stephen Keller, the clause, the threat to walk away. About the second call, Keller's fury, and her promise that the deal would be fixed by morning. Her voice wavered. Her hands shook as she held her rag like a shield. She expected anger, dismissal, maybe even the end of her job. But when she finished, Crawford didn't shout. Instead, he turned to his assistant. Check the draft, he ordered. The assistant flipped through the folder. Papers rustled. A silence thick as smoke filled the office. Then, the assistant froze. His eyes widened. It's true, he whispered. Someone slipped in the exclusivity clause. It wasn't approved. Crawford's jaw tightened. His gaze shifted back to Marjorie. You answered my phone? Yes, sir, she said softly. Her throat burned. If I hadn't, the deal would already be gone. The room went still. For a long moment, she braced for the explosion, the anger of a man used to total control, a man unaccustomed to being interrupted by janitors. But instead, Crawford's expression changed. Not anger. Not dismissal. Something else. Recognition. He strode to his desk. Patch Keller through. Now. Within seconds, the phone buzzed. A click. Then Keller's voice filled the room, sharp as broken glass. I gave you until sunrise, Crawford. The clause was not agreed to. If this is how you do business, we are finished." But Crawford cut in. "First, Mr. Keller, thank you for your patience. The clause was a mistake. It is already being removed. The deal stands." Silence. Then Keller grunted. "Good. See that it is." Crawford paused. Then he added something that made Marjorie's breath catch. "And I must also thank the person who kept this alive until I could speak with you. Someone I should have paid attention to a long time ago." His eyes flicked toward her. The call ended. The room was quiet. Crawford turned fully to Marjorie now. "Do you realize you saved this company from disaster?" She shook her head quickly. "I only answered the phone." "No," his voice was firm. "You calmed one of the toughest negotiators in Europe. You gave me time to make this right. That isn't luck. That's instinct." For the first time in 7 years of walking those halls, Marjorie felt truly seen. Not as the cleaner. Not as a uniform, a cart, or a mop. But as a person. A woman who mattered. Crawford studied her for a moment longer, then said something that stunned her even more. "Later this week, I want you to sit in with my executives. You've been here for years, seeing everything, hearing everything. Sometimes the best perspective comes from the people no one bothers to listen to." Marjorie's breath caught. Her hands trembled. For years she had walked invisible through this place, never acknowledged, never valued. And now she was being asked to sit at the very table she had spent her life cleaning around. Her voice cracked as she whispered one word. "Yes." That morning, as the sun rose higher over Cleveland, Marjorie Ellis stepped out of the shadows. For the first time in decades, she wasn't just surviving. She was being recognized. And that recognition would change everything. Word spreads fast inside big companies. At first, it was only whispers. Executives passing in hallways, murmuring about how the Keller deal had nearly collapsed. But soon there was another layer to the story. A name. A detail that didn't fit the usual script. The deal hadn't been saved by a lawyer. Not by an executive. Not even by Richard Crawford himself. It had been saved by the night cleaner. For the first time in 7 years, people greeted Marjorie by name. Not "hey" or "excuse me" or silence. Her name. "Good morning, Marjorie. Thank you for what you did. I heard you saved us." Some even asked her opinion. Small things at first. "What do you think of this office layout? Did you notice anything unusual in the reports left behind?" Questions that seemed ordinary, but to her they meant everything. Because for the first time she wasn't invisible anymore. Richard Crawford made sure of it. Whenever he saw her in the building, he stopped. He greeted her with the same respect he gave his executives. He let others see it too, a signal that this woman mattered. And one afternoon, as promised, she sat in a meeting with his senior staff. Not to make decisions, not to change the course of the company, but simply to share what she'd seen. Years of quiet observation poured out of her. The way people behaved when they thought no one was listening, the flaws in the system, the blind spots nobody noticed. The executives listened. Really listened. Because when the CEO tells you to hear someone, you do. But through it all, Marjorie remained the same. She still rode the bus home at the end of her shift. She still cooked simple meals in her small apartment. She still scrubbed and dusted and polished because that was her job. She didn't brag to her children or her neighbors. She didn't tell the story as if she had saved $1 billion deal. She just said, "Work's been busy," and left it at that. Because she wasn't chasing fame or recognition. What had changed wasn't her job, it was her place in the world. She was no longer invisible. One evening, waiting at the bus stop, Marjorie looked out across the lake. The water reflected the city lights, glittering like stars that had fallen to earth. She thought about the phone that wouldn't stop ringing, and how easy it would have been to ignore it. She could have said, "It's not my job." She could have walked away. But she hadn't. She had answered. And because of that small, trembling decision, everything was different. The story of Marjorie Ellis isn't just about saving a contract. It isn't about business or billion-dollar deals. It's about what happens when someone who has been overlooked for a lifetime finally gets seen. It's about the courage to act even when it isn't your place. It's about how the smallest choices, like picking up a phone, can ripple outward in ways you never imagined. So the next time you pass someone sweeping a hallway or wiping down a counter or working long after everyone else has gone home, pause. Say hello. See them. Because you don't know whose quiet hands might one day hold the courage to save everything. Sometimes heroes don't wear suits. Sometimes they don't carry briefcases. Sometimes they don't even have business cards with their names on them. Sometimes heroes carry a mop. If Marjorie's story moved you, don't just scroll away. Share this video with someone who needs a reminder that every person matters no matter their job or title. And if you want more stories of unseen heroes like her, make sure to subscribe and join us for the next one.